Welcome to a Business Life series brought to you by HubYuno. The inspiration for this series is best summed up by two of our favourite quotes. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest by Benjamin Franklin, and Warren Buffett's the best investment you can make is in yourself. The more you learn, the more you earn. In a Business Life series, we get business leaders from all sectors and walks of life to tell their stories. The hope is that you can learn from their success and failures and apply it to your own business journey. Today I've got a great interview with Tim Brogg, where we go through his experience in businesses and especially in the farming community, helping small local Hampshire farmers thrive. Before we get started, let me just quickly tell you about what we do. Do you want to grow your small business but are put off by extortionate fees charged by marketing agencies or not sure where to start? We promise you that all the skills and techniques you need are learnable. At Yuno, we give you agency level knowledge with ongoing support for a fraction of the cost with our HubYuno platform. Our online courses and webinars teach you the online marketing skills you need to grow your business. The bite-sized mobile-friendly video lessons fit in with your busy work schedule. The webinars provide our community with ongoing support to make continued marginal gains, test out new ideas and stay ahead. Try it for free with 2 courses and a selection of webinars. Just click sign up for free, search HubYuno, or click the link in the description if you are watching on YouTube. Hi Tim, how's it going?
It's good, thank you, Johnny. It's good weekend and all ready for the week ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say nice and bright and early on a Monday morning.
Yeah, not always the best time to do an interview, but we'll carry on.
No, we'll give it a try, see how it goes. So the idea at the start is just to kind of give a run through of your life story, almost like an elevator pitch of your life story in kind of 30 seconds a minute, if you can, just kind of sum it up and talk us through it.
Okay, we'll have a go. You shut me up when I've been speaking too long.
No worries.
I was born a farmer's son from Hampshire, a Hampshire farmer's son. Went off to university, studied farming and agriculture. That was kind of always my thing. Pigs, stuff like that, and a lovely farm to sort of run around in as a youngster. Went to university, but a bit of hospital. I suppose my first work life, apart from doing stuff on the farm like stacking bales and sorting out potatoes and hop picking, which I always did. And then the first job off the farm was probably as a hospital porter during my university years and holidays. Then really into a big wide world, started with what they call precision farming, which was using satellite systems on tractors. We sort of helped to launch that into the UK. From there, it was away from farming onto value added, so working with cheese producers and vineyards and beer producers and chocolate makers and helping them as small businesses to sort of get bigger. I then went back to sort of working with landowners and lots of different businesses there and helping them and sorting out their issues, to really where I am today, which is helping, still helping businesses, but with the FSB, Federation of Small Businesses, and now working we have 160,000 members in the country, and I look after those ones in really Southampton, Winchester, Andover areas. So really supporting them and developing membership for the FSB.
So it sounds kind of a winding road. Before you went to uni, were you certain it was kind of agriculture? That is what you definitely wanted to do?
This is all I ever knew, actually. And back then, I suppose it was a family farm. I had an older brother, and whilst farming used to be a lovely sort of thing to be into, now I think food has been very much devalued, and farming is not what it used to be. So even back then, which would have been 25 years ago, I suppose the writing was on the wall that farming was going to get a lot tougher, as essentially food got a lot cheaper, sadly.
So is that, so you were at university and did you say you had a job as a porter in university?
Yes, well, my mother was always into nursing, and it was just something, I don't know how I fell into it. I think she was working at the local hospital at the time, and it was, I don't know actually why I wasn't working on a farm, because we always did that every holiday, working on the farm. But this was good though, because it was basically pushing patients around this orthopedic hospital and being nice. But actually it was, what it taught me there, I guess you were sort of, as a porter, you were sort of at the bottom of the path, but I mean, it wasn't the case, but, and I made the best of it. And it was a lovely, great community of doctors, a lot actually about some work. and respect, and just being happy, whatever you're doing, you know, whether it's sorting potatoes or lifting bales in a hot bar, you know, you've always sort of got to make it fun, haven't you? You know, it can't be, you know, I've never wanted to do, although they were the best jobs, I always made the best of them. I think that's important in life, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I had my first job when I was sort of 13, just washing out wetsuits and stuff. And I've talked to the 4 or 5 people I've chatted to so far, all had jobs when they were younger, all had Saturday jobs before they sort of left uni and got into their main one. They started work at a relatively young age, even if it was, as I said, even if it was helping out and starting right at the bottom of something that they all think taught them a lot. So you came out of university and the first job was working for the company that were getting satellite tracking over onto tracks over here.
It was, yes. I mean, I started really because I wanted to be into sort of what we call agronomy, which is basically a plant doctor. And I did that for a bit, but the chap who owned that company also had this other company where they were bringing an American concept of really spot applying chemicals and fertilizer to crops rather than blanket applications. And I sort of shifted onto that because I guess it was more exciting than looking at plants at the time. And then we were testing the systems for the UK tractors really, rather than these massive great machines they used in America, which was never really going to fit the English system. But I guess that the challenge there was going into conventional sort of tractor driving where they were just spreading stuff blanket across a field and saying, we're going to put a laptop in your cab and we're going to put a satellite receiver in your cab and we're going to put a data transfer unit. So basically applying these things which the guys in the cab had never actually seen in their lives. So that's why I learned to make things simple, you know, and I did all the instruction books and the training to really get what was, I suppose, a fairly complex sort of system into a very practical application. So actually everybody could use it rather than having a computer engineer sat in the tractor with you, because that never would have worked.
So did you feel that was successful? Did farmers sort of take it on?
They did. Well, back then, I mean, again, we're going back 20 years probably now. Back then, it was a very new concept, and farmers are not the most. I mean, some are, but they've always sort of been wary. A few top percent will jump into new things, but because it's a very traditional sort of pastime, they don't all jump on the chance of newfangled technology because it's not what they do. So it was slow going then. I went all around the country really promoting it. But now, 20 years on, name me someone who isn't doing it. You know, it's everywhere now because because inputs are expensive. You know, fertilizer is expensive. You don't want to be putting it where you don't need it. And also we're much more conscious of the environment now. And if we don't need to put it there, we shouldn't put it there. So again, you're helping actually the ecosystem as you go. So it's fairly mainstream now.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting start. So when you moved on from that job, did you just sort of feel like it was time to move on, or what kind of made you move on from that one?
I did. It was time to move on. I probably did, I think about probably 5 years there. And I'd been there, and it was taking me all around the country, up to, all around sort of all the, northern Scotland doing stuff. And so I was getting around, I was meeting lots of farmers. But it was quite a hard graft, to be honest. And it was, it was hard work. We got, we were progressing, but I saw this role, which was going back to added value. So it was still with farmers, but there were farmers who were adding value to something. So we had dairy farmers who were making cheese. We had beef farmers who were actually making their own sausages. And I really fancied the sort of added value in farming, because back then the sort of straight growing, it was fairly tough times. It's still tough now. So I sort of did a shift, and also wanted to be back in Hampshire rather than all over the country. So that's when I started with Hampshire Fair and Hampshire Farmers Markets, which was sort of the food groups based in Winchester and Hampshire.
And with the added value, did it happen with farming, and then you sort of thought, oh, this can happen within other industries, or how did it sort of progress from there?
It was exciting back then. It was again with the rise of sort of localism, really, and supporting local. Again, it's fairly normal now. We know we probably should be supporting our local businesses, but back then, when I said sort of food was getting cheaper in farming, as was the knowledge of where food actually came from, and people didn't really know a lot, and people don't believe me, but children didn't really know, or the vast majority of children didn't know that milk came from cows and potatoes came from the ground and apples came from trees. And you laugh, but it's true. People didn't. We completely lost that culture. Food was just a cheap commodity, when in fact what we stick in our bodies, and as we've learned now, has got, and how we stick it in our bodies, has got a lot to answer for about how overburdened the NHS is, and also many other societal problems, which I kind of learned on my career path. So food is actually very important, how we eat it, how we pay for it, and where it comes from, in terms of so many aspects of our lives. So that's what was exciting about it. And back then I was sort of doing, I suppose, artisan cheese and fine Hampshire beers, but I very quickly thought, well, actually, it should be good food for everybody, not just for, let's say, the people who shop in Waitrose. So that's when I really set about doing school food and things like that, and making sure that all skilled school children had access to New Forest free-range eggs and things like that. So I quickly changed, and also needed a break as well, those who wanted to add value, because if you've just got a commodity, a piece of meat or a bucket of grain, if you can actually make a sausage out of it, make a steak, or you can make a loaf of bread, you're then actually getting a much higher return than just selling it to someone else who will make the bread. And you see that with the supermarkets now. They are making all the profit, and actually the people who are doing the hard graft and producing the milk and producing the grain are really just scraping a living and what they're paid for all their hard work. So that was a good thing about it. It was getting the chap at the bottom making it to actually then produce and add value himself, and not let someone else add value. And at the same time, the story it's a great story, it's a great product, and if we get local people to buy it, you've cut out a lot of middlemen, you've cut out a lot of transport, you've cut out a lot of all sorts, and actually means you're then having good value, tasty food with a provenance which has come from just down the road. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah, no, there's tons of. I almost say I take it for granted now that I'll go around Hampshire and there'll be, a number of farmers, places that you can visit will have their own produce. So when you started, was there kind of any of it in Hampshire, or was it literally just selling it to the big supermarkets?
Well, there were pockets of people, but it wasn't, I suppose that's why Hampshire Fair was started. It was an initiative of Hampshire County Council. They were saying that we've got some good producers here, but let's coordinate it, let's support them, and let's actually give people an option, producers an option, to be able to sell their products direct. And at the same time, that's when the Hampshire Farmers Markets had started, which was giving farmers a direct, really, table to sell their produce from in the city. So the Winchester Farmers Market, back then, the Hampshire Farmers Markets were the biggest farmers markets in the country for many, many years. But it took coordination, it took Hampshire County Council to see that, to have the foresight. And they generated, millions and millions of pounds, because it gave the farmers the opportunity. And then where Hampshire Fair came in, that was to really then step it up a bit more. So we were helping with branding, with legislation, with trade development. So if they wanted to be in Waitrose, for example, or they wanted to be in shops or restaurants, we would give them support to get that bit of steak on a table into a package ready to go to the restaurant, because obviously there's a lot of regulation. And branding was the big thing, actually. Branding, and that's what I learned about branding, that when you're a farmer or in any product, if you're stood opposite someone who wants to buy your products, and you can show them your products, and you can talk passionately about your products, and you can tell the story face to face, that makes it really good for selling the product. As soon as you're not there telling that story, and let's say that product is sat on a shelf somewhere next to all the different products, or all the same but different, that's what I suppose what I learned about branding, that story that you can tell has to go on a label and has to go somewhere else if you can't be there talking about it. And that's really where we get their passion, their story, and have to put it on a label this big on a jar of jam or chutney, so the whole story could be told again. And that was the difference between direct selling and then actually letting someone else sell the product for you.
So did you just learn about branding as you went, or how did you sort of pick up that skill?
I brought experts in, but most of it I did learn, actually, because another part of telling the food story, farming story, is what we had the Hampshire Food Festival. So we had about 100 different events, and that was farm walks. We were opening up restaurants, and people were going to have a look behind the scenes. We did food talks. We had celebrity chefs, all sorts of activities to really help get people excited about food and where it came from. And that was event management. I'd never learned event management. I'd never really learned about branding, but I knew lots of people, so I got people in to give talks, much like I do now with FSB. If there's a need there, I'll get someone in to talk to them, and I'll actually, and help develop it. So a lot of it is making connections, but also actually seeing the opportunities that there are, which is the main thing, which I guess I'm fairly good at. But you still aren't experts, because even to this day, I'm not an expert on branding, but I do know. But if you're passionate about a product, whether it's then if you take someone on and you want them to share your passion, or how you get your passion over to someone else or to a consumer is an incredibly important thing to do. And I guess back now social media is all there, whereas back then, 20 years ago, it probably wasn't as readily available, or people didn't use social media in the extent they do now to get their passion for their wares over to the public.
And was that kind of easy for the farmers? Did the farmers kind of look at this and think, yes, this can work, I'm on it? Or was there a very sort of mixed bag? Or
it was a mixed bag. Some people were there, some people weren't. The best thing is but they all had fantastic products. That was a thing, And again, going back to business, isn't it? Like we're all good at something, or we have our passions. It might be making cheese, it might be making furniture. And I suppose when it comes to business, being passionate and being very good at producing something is only a small bit of running a successful business. And it will soon come unstuck if you don't actually bring other people in to help with the other bits. And those could be regulation, legislation, sales, marketing, all those really important things, customer service. And that's really what we taught people or help them with. Because I say a good lump of cheese, maybe the best lump of cheese in the world, but if it's just you, your cows and lump of cheese, you're not going to build a big business on the back of it, because you have to scale up and you have to deal with customers. And that's a big, and you want the customers coming back as well. So that applies to any business nowadays, And I suppose that's the good thing about the FSB, or Federation of Small Businesses. We sort of say to people, carry on doing the bit you love, but don't ignore the legislation and the regulation, because it will come back and bite you, because we all need to be compliant, whether it's health and safety, whether it's food hygiene, the tax we pay, how we pay it, employing people, employment law. If that bit's not right, it doesn't matter how good you are at making cheese, you will still lose that business, or it could come unstuck if you don't follow all the other, what I call the boring bits of business. And really, that's where the FSB helps now, which is why it's quite exciting to sort of be where I am now, because it's really full circle. But I'm just doing a lot more different businesses, not just cheesemakers and sausage producers.
So it sounds like the farmers thing within Hampshire was just an upward trajectory of had this idea about branding, kept on going, or what were like the challenges along the way? What were like the really tough bits?
Well, the tough bits, the Holy Grail. Actually, I'll go back to you about Hampshire and why Hampshire was special. We did have the biggest farmers markets in the country. We had the biggest food festival in the country. I did the biggest county sausage competition in the country. So we always went for the biggest. So Hampshire was special in that respect. That we had lots of good producers, lots of support, and we made it the best. In terms of the Holy Grail, as I call it, that was when I went, I said about good food for all. And back then we were looking at public sector procurement, and that is what the council or the public sector spends on feeding the school children. So back then we had 30,000 meals a day, that was school food. Okay, so 520 schools. And we had all the care homes and everything else that Hampshire County Council bought food for. We were talking about local. They spent in 1 year, or an average year, they would spend £12 million on that food. And what we did a survey and we said, okay, can you tell us how much of that £12 million, how much of that food is bought from Hampshire? Okay, and it was a pretty poor response, i.e. not a lot was bought in Hampshire. So we said, right, we're going to change that. and that was the Holy Grail. The reason they didn't do it, there were lots of reasons why public sector didn't buy food at that stage, namely state aid or European legislation. EU legislation meant that you couldn't state on a contract, we just want to buy local food. That was illegal. You know, the French producers, the German producers had as much right of supplying our schools as the Hampshire producers did, even though they were right next door to the school. And that's the EU regulation for you. The other thing was, you know, volume, massive volumes needed, and lots of multiple drop points. So you basically necessitated that you had to go to the bigger people who could deliver. And as small producers weren't really geared up at that stage to producing all the eggs needed for all the schools and getting all those eggs in the individual schools. 520 schools needed a delivery every 2 days. So you can see the complexity here. Plus they had to have value for money, it's taxpayers' money. So loads and loads of problems why no one had done it. But we did it. And it took about 2 years. And again, there's a whole story in itself how we did it. But we were legal, we didn't break any rules. And the bottom line was, within that 2 years, we finished up with 300,000 litres of Hampshire apple juice in Hampshire schools. So nearly 500,000 litres. 700,000 free-range eggs from the New Forest going into schools and care homes. 17 tonnes of Hampshire beef. 10,000 cabbages from Hampshire, and about £2 million a year we had going in from Hampshire farms. So that was good. And no one else has ever done that. No one else in the country had done it. I still think to this day, it hasn't been done, but we did it. So
yeah. There. That's a pretty amazing story. There's an interesting bit, actually. I'll just dive in on it's obviously not really about your life story, but it's kind of a hot topic at the moment, or is going to be. So EU regulation, do you feel, because obviously there's a lot of negativity about Brexit with business, do you feel in some cases it's going to be good to have some of these regulations sort of changed and have more kind of British-centric businesses, or is it there, you know?
Without getting too political, and I really don't always state my views, but I think the English are always good at gold-plating the EU rules anyway. So, you know, the way our government applied those EU rules were probably tougher than some of the other EU countries. My only real, so we always gold-plated everything and made it difficult. We made it difficult for people, more difficult than it probably should have been. My one fear now is we have some of the best, if not the best, standards of farming, animal welfare, food safety in this country. We do. And my one fear is when those barriers come down, and then we suddenly start getting food from the States or something, which is not grown to the same standards in terms of food safety or animal welfare. And it just seems that we're going to chuck out, or our government will say, we don't really care. You know, you've had always high standards, but chlorine washed chicken is a lot cheaper. And also means we can do something else with the States, like buy their arms or something. So I think the UK food is going to be the pawn in all this, in terms of all the other deals which will be made. And that is really, really bad news in terms of food standards and the efforts our food producers go to in response to what our consumers demand. But in fact, when you get down to the bottom line, most of our consumers just want cheap food. And they'll soon forget about chlorine washed chicken if Tesco's puts it 2 for £1 and £2 cheaper than something which is much safer and has had a much better life. And that's the danger, that we will just open up our borders and have any old stinking, rotting stuff which has been injected with God knows what. And I'm being I'm not being that generalistic, because it's kind of it, flooding in it, and that will be a disaster. And you'll see our farmers go out of business.
So, I mean,
sorry for the rant.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's really interesting to get, because I feel like with kind of the Brexit issues and things like that, I hear a lot of the broad stuff from politicians, but I don't hear, like, it's very nice to talk to people who are kind of inside industries and kind of know a little bit more detail on some of this stuff.
Well, basically, a lot of our lamb, a lot of our stuff goes to Europe. It goes to your nearest neighbours. A lot of our products goes to nearest neighbours, which makes sense. So now you can't deal with them. Yeah, do the maths. It's not always would say it was a great move, but that's as far as I go on Brexit.
So you did the helping these farmers with the branding, etc., and then did you find it was kind of an easy transition to go to other small businesses and say, look, this is where we scaled up with this one. This is, these are sort of techniques and things similar you can think about and how you do it.
Well, actually, when I moved on, because after Hampshire Fair, I moved on to working with landowners and their sort of issues. So at some farmers, it could be farmers, golf courses, anybody with who owned land. And so they weren't really a lot of them were very established businesses. And certainly when it comes to land, these businesses have been going for 10 generations. So there was not a lot. I mean, there were people diversifying, obviously, who were, because most farmers now diversify. So they have some other string to their bow because they just can't rely on producing food anymore to keep the business going. So whether that's converting old barns into offices or to holiday lets or having glamping sites or going into farm shops, but most people have diversified. And the new issues there are things like planning and stuff. So although I wasn't talking to people about branding and how to start a business, we were tackling other issues like the local council's view of a new farm shop in terms of it meant building in the countryside. So there was often issues with planners, and there actually what I applied from Hampshire Fair was, if you've got an issue between two parties, get them together and get them talk, give them a good meal, get them talking, and get each side to understand the other side. Because that's what I did with the food procurement, is all these people who are buying all this food, they'd never met a farmer in their life. They never had, much like a lot of chefs had never met a farmer. So what I did, I said, well, the first thing you can do about understanding local food is go and have a look at the farm, meet the farmer, see the chickens, see the cows. So that was probably one of my other lessons, really. But if there's ever an issue or blockage, get the people together and get them to understand each other's issues. And that's really what I took to the CLA of a landowner issue, that we had the planners walking around the farm, listening to the farmers actually saying that, I had this old barn here, my tractor's now got bigger and it won't fit in the barn, so I can't use the barn. But actually, it's a lovely old barn and I produce some meat and some eggs, so it'd be nice if I converted it into a shop, or it would make a lovely holiday let. I could convert it and people could come stay in the countryside, for example. So we were just getting that learning curve there. So that's really the issues I had then. It wasn't about startup businesses. It was about what are the blockages and how can we unblock them.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. And it's it's a really, really interesting life story and kind of what you've done, the skills you've learned kind of along the way. Just to round it off, kind of a bit cheesy, I guess, but what would be like the 3 main bits of advice that you'd have for people if you were kind of, people in business, just from your life story, what would you say are the 3 things that you've learned that would be good to pass on?
I always think in life, whatever you're doing, keep it simple. I like keep everything simple. And whether that is signage to your shop or instructions on a website or anything else, or keep things simple, because we're simple animals, and so that's important. I think always give more than you take. Most definitely. I think. And the other one, actually, the other day, someone, and it sums it up, actually, a lot of it, and that was 3 words. But someone gave it to me on a badge, actually. It was a really special badge. And those words, actually, were community. So we're a community of farmers or landowners or small businesses, community, connection, and collaboration. And really, those 3 words, that's kind of what life's about, isn't it? And I'm very much about collaborations now and helping each other. What more can you say? If you apply that, you should be all right.
Oh, that was 3 lovely bits of advice. All right, thank you very much, Tim. That was a great interview and a great life story through business, and I hope people watched, learned, and got a lot from that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Johnny.
No worries.